Well, I'm for full disclosure, so I've got to tell you, I was really pleased tonight when our speaker accepted the invitation to come out to the Liberty Forum of Silicon Valley. But I figured he checked out our website, he saw our impressive roster of previous speakers, he was anxious to share his insider insights about government and media with us, a unique and freedom-loving audience here in the belly of the beast. I thought that was what was motivating him. And Lawfare. The topic sadly has become more and more relevant since the date of our meeting approached. At the time of our first conversation, we did not yet have a former president pending sentencing on a bookkeeping charge. But then I thought about it a little bit more and I realized tonight's guest was probably actually on a safari. You see, Jason Chaffetz, as many of you know, hosts a weekly podcast called Jason in the House. I'm going to move this out of here. Sure, it's informative and he hosts very interesting guests, but I think he's here to stock up on stories. You see, he has a regular feature called Always Somebody Doing Something Stupid Somewhere. And where is a richer, more saturated place to spot civic absurdity than our beloved California? Sad but true. This is a state that turned a $97 billion surplus into a $45 billion deficit in just 2 years. Jason, you want stupid? We got it. Jason was born here in Los Gatos, by the way. He's a Fox News contributor and a 2-time New York Times best-selling author. His books include The Deep State, How an Army of Bureaucrats Protected Barack Obama and is Working to Destroy the Trump Agenda, Power Grab, The Liberal Scheme to Undermine Trump, the GOP, and our Republic, They Never Let a Crisis Go to Waste, The Truth About Disaster Liberalism, and most recently, Puppeteers, the people who control America. Elected 5 times to 5 terms in Congress, he announced when he first arrived in D.C. that he would be sleeping on a cot in his office and showering in the congressional gym, I guess it is. Can't even imagine what that's like. But he was sending a message that he certainly was going to tighten his own belt. I'm not sure exactly how long that went on, Jason, but I don't think he was probably very popular with his colleagues. He actually shared with us at dinner tonight that he showed up. Well, I'm going to let you tell that story, Jason, but he had quite an arrival in Washington, D.C. He served on a number of committees, including from 2015 to 2017 as chair of the Oversight Committee, which is tasked with investigating waste, fraud, and abuse in the executive branch. What were you doing? There's nothing there, is there? He also chaired the Subcommittee on National Security, Homeland Defense, and Foreign Operations, as well as being a member of the House Judiciary Committee. I want to note that tonight's speaker is also part of Peter Schweitzer's Government Accountability Institute, from which we've had 3 terrific speakers, Eric Eggers, Seamus Bruner, and Luke Rosiak. We're really hoping that Peter will come out one day, but we have a lot of affection and admiration and appreciation for the Government Accountability Institute. So, please help me welcome tonight's guest, who is, to the best of my knowledge, the only Liberty Forum of Silicon Valley speaker who has been babysat by Sandy Koufax. Jason?
All right. That felt so far away. I wanted to be down here a little bit better, so I hope you can hear me all right. So thanks so much for having me in the warm reception. I want you to know that I came with my favorite babysitter who's here today. So Anne, you got to stand up here for a second. This is Anne. Now, this probably requires a little explanation, because I was born in Los Gatos. We had our house was in Saratoga, and then she sent me this nice note because we're our family. I don't know if you all know where Brookside is, but it's a little tennis and swim club. And she evidently was my babysitter when I was, 5 years old and jumping in the pool when I shouldn't have jumped in and stuff like that. And it was just very sweet to get that nice note and have her talk about me and my younger brother, Alex. And I had an older half brother too. And but what a sweet memory. Today I got in the car and I went over do y'all know the butter paddle? My mom volunteered at the butter paddle. My dad was in the Air Force. He was also on Channel 11. He was a sportscaster way back even before I was born on Channel 11. And he was also in the automobile business. It was called the Little House of Hardtops with Don Lucas, the Lucas group there. Don Lucas kept doing what Don Lucas is doing. My dad went off and did something else, unfortunately. But then the Del Grand family, that's who I kind of grew up with Sean and Alicia and the Del Grands. And so I got some good ties now. I only lived here till I was 7. So, I don't want to push it too far, but I drove by Foothill. I lived off Palomino Way up by the vineyards when it used to be cow fields and all that. And the Sandy Koufax thing probably demands a little bit of an explanation. My dad went to Penn State and he was the manager of the football team, but he knew guys on the baseball team. And one of those baseball players ended up playing with Sandy Koufax. And my dad became very good friends with Sandy Koufax. Now, I haven't seen Sandy in 50 years, but I have all these pictures and memorabilia and there was one time when my parents evidently went to Mexico for like a week. And I was looking through my photo album and I had these pictures with all these old people. And I said to my parents, this is a long time ago, I said to my parents, who are these people? Am I related to them? I said, no, you're not related to them. But this is at the height of Sandy Koufax's fame and, pitching for the Dodgers. He said, we went to Mexico and we left you with Sandy. And Sandy was not exactly, we weren't totally sure he could handle you because I was like 2. And he said, so he stayed at his parents, and I think it was like San Luis Obispo or something like that. I mean, it may have been Paso Robles. I don't know. It was one of those places. He said, so all those pictures of you and those old people, that's Sandy's parents. Sandy's taking those pictures. But he actually, when I was born, he wrote me this nice thing, a check. And the check is made out to Jason Chaffetz, $25. And my mom was smart enough to cash it and get a copy of it. So I have the original of the Sandy Koufax check made out to Jason Chaffetz with an accompanying letter saying that this does not constitute a legal contract and would not make me ineligible for should I play any sort of sports. And I actually brought me ultimately to Utah I was a place kicker on the BYU football team. And so I'm glad I had that letter to prove that I had not broken any college athletic rules. So this is all not normally part of my introduction of how I do this. Very blessed to my family. My wife and I have been married some 33 years now. Thank you. And our kids are married, which is hard to believe. Now, being from Utah, let me clarify. They're not married to each other, okay? So they're married. Some of you don't get that joke, but that's okay. So, but day before yesterday, our son, we have a son and then 2 daughters, and they're all married, like I said, and but we had our 6th grandchild. So, little girl, she's about 2 days old. I didn't warn you this, but there was a chance I was going to back out on this. So, but the birth came at just the right time. So, I didn't want to make you too nervous. You can be nervous now, but yeah. We're very blessed. And there's a couple things I'd love to share with you tonight, and I think we are doing some question and answers, so I don't know if there's questions and how they get them to you, but I know there's kind of a way of doing that. But part of my quest here is to get you to really internalize and think about why is it that you believe what you believe? Like, why do you believe what you believe? Why do you do what you love and do? Like, why do you do that? And there kind of needs to, I think, be an introspection, because we as Americans, we're very independent, we're very liberty-oriented, right? But we also tend to yell and scream at each other probably a little too much. And part of my message here is, and look, I make a living doing this, right? We go out on Facebook and Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it this week, and Instagram, and we're pretty good at yelling at each other, you know, and coming up with 140 characters. A lot of conservatives, a lot of Republicans are really good at citing statistics, right? I can tell you what the labor participation rate is and the inflation this and that. But if you're really going to move people, if you're really going to talk to people, break bread with people, and actually move people and share from your heart what it is you believe and why you believe it, then you're going to ultimately be more successful than if you just yell statistics all the time at each other. And I really do believe that in my heart, that the most successful things that you do in a political way, which is the foundation of our country, right? Our country was founded on the idea of liberty, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that we were going to argue, but in a peaceful way, in a good way. It's in our Constitution, for goodness sake. You can petition your government peacefully. Peacefully. That's what it's supposed to do. You know, people all the time, they're talking about the Congress, and I'm driving these people nuts with the camera, sorry. And go back and forth here. See how good you are. You know, we talk about how the vitriol, and a lot of people I bump into say, oh, can't you all just get along? But you know what? It's okay to stand up for what you believe in. That's the American way. The American way is to petition your government, is to stand up. That's your First Amendment right. It's the reason why it's the First Amendment right, right? So you should be doing those things. But I would also argue how you do it makes a difference. And you can disagree. You don't want to be the one that's disagreeable. You don't want to be that person in the room that nobody wants to chat with. And so there's a nuance here, you know. Inevitably, between your friends and relatives or kids or whatever it might be, your brother, sister, they're like off the rails, you know. They think Joe Biden's just fine. He's doing great, you know. He's one of those ones that watch the debate and you're more encouraged to vote for him, you know. Like, really? Okay. I'm also one that believes, by the way, that I don't think Republicans have all the answers to everything. I really don't. There ought to be a way to communicate and interact and talk and come up with a reasonable approach. You know, some of the more ardent members of Congress, you can pick either side of the aisle, I don't think they're that effective. I think they're failing in their job. Because your job in Congress, the way our founders set it up, is the art of persuasion. You're supposed to be able to make an argument that compels people to join your side and garner hundreds of votes of support. You know, we're in this age of social media, and social media will compel you to try to get as many likes as possible. Great. Okay, you got a real good zinger out there. You know, and I've done my fair share of them. I was in Germany once, I think it was Germany, and they had this display, and it was a picture, it was this life-size wooden, it was beautiful, it was really well carved, but it was a wooden depiction of Pinocchio. And I sat down next to it, and I put it out on Instagram, and I said, just ran into James Comey, he's telling me about his new book. That went pretty far and wide, you know. I was down at Disneyland, and I posted up on Instagram. I thought it was innocent enough. Have you all been to Disneyland and they've got that wooden Indian, you know, and I put my arm around and said, look, I ran into Elizabeth Warren here at Disneyland, you know. Oh my goodness, that thing just took off to the moon, you know. Okay, so All right, so I can't exactly say I've always practiced what I preach in here, but I'm just saying I was trying to have some fun. But the more things change, the more they stay the same. But social media has not necessarily been the best of friends in moving this country forward. So let me give you a little bit of, it's a great tool, right? It's a great vehicle. I'm not going to get off of it, but there's also a right way, and I would argue a wrong way to kind of do that. So with the challenge in your mind of, okay, how do we get so that there's thousands of people that want to attend a meeting on a beautiful night and talk about liberty and the future of our country? How do we do that? Okay. It's interesting because things are always changing. There are some memes and things out there that I've seen and I've heard. This is not necessarily my original thought, other than I'm coupling them together. Okay. It used to be in this country that everybody had a horse and only rich people had vehicles. Now, everybody has a vehicle and only rich people have horses, right? If the internet had been invented first, what would have happened? Somebody, genius person, probably from this Silicon Valley, would come up and say, hey, I got a solution to that. I'm going to take this paper and I'm going to take the best of news, weather, sports, obituaries, jobs that are available, and I'm going to put it in this piece of paper, and I'm going to get somebody young to come by and at 4:30 in the morning drop it off on your porch so that, you know what, when you wake up and you want to get that cup of coffee, you want to have a bowl of cereal, you can read about it. In fact, if you're commuting to work or getting on a train or something, you can just read this, and when you're done with it, you can put it at the bottom of the puppy thing or at where your canaries are, and you can use it as, we can recycle it, use it for multiple things. You can even burn it in your fireplace if you want. But no, the newspaper was invented first. Now it's obsolete because everything's on the internet, right? If somebody had said, we're going to synthesize everything on the internet to just what you want, it would have probably been real successful. There's this great meme out there, take this the right way, but it's Howard Cosell. And you can look this up. It's Howard Cosell, right? Most of you are old enough, some of you aren't. Most of you are old enough to know that if it was a real sporting event, Howard Cosell was probably going to be there broadcasting, right? It's Howard Cosell, and on one side of Howard is O.J. Simpson. On the other side of him is Bruce Jenner. And he's interviewing both of them at the same time, and the meme just says, oh, how things are going to change, you know? It was just like, it still makes me smile. Okay? Life's going to change. Life's going to get weird. Life's going to go lots of different directions. Principles are the things that stay true over the course of time, no matter what happens in our history. Now, the great thing about the United States of America is we figure these things out, right? We collectively come together. But there are parts of the process and the system that I would argue that are broken. At the end of the day, it's not Congress that's going to fix them. It's not going to be Washington, D.C. that solves these problems. It's going to be you and me and people all across this country coming together saying, no more. We're in control. Government works for you, right? That's the way it's supposed to be. But it only works that way if you stand up, participate, engage, and collectively get together and persuade others, and we move it forward in that direction to achieve what we want to achieve. So let me give you just a little bit of history on some things that at least I focused on, because you could take this a million different directions and you'd all be right, okay? But you've probably come here in part because, A, the forum's great and they always have good speakers, but I'm not Julian Assange yet, but, you know, I am glad you came out. So back in 1814, there was a move by the early Congress to create a committee that was going to oversee every expenditure in the United States Congress. It was known under a different name, but back in 1814 they did this. Now, it's changed names throughout the decades, couple hundred years here, And what was today's modern day Oversight Committee grew. It was big, it was small. It was big again. It was the largest committee in all of Congress. And it basically said for every expenditure, we're going to oversee that so that Congress can watch what the executive branch is doing with what was appropriated by the representatives. Remember, all the spending bills originate in the House of Representatives. So they did that, and they moved back and forth. But some interesting things happened along the way with this Oversight Committee, again, known by a different name. In the mid-1800s, there was a person who joined this committee as a freshman. He was a congressman from Illinois, and his name was Abraham Lincoln. They didn't call him Honest Abe and all the great nicknames that we have today. His name that they used as a nickname was Spotty. Spotty because days after he was sworn in, he started giving a series of speeches questioning the President of the United States. I think it was President Polk. I'm about 98% sure it was Polk, but he started giving these speeches because he was questioning where the Mexican-American War started. He could not believe the president was telling the truth. The president was saying it started on U.S. territory and the Mexicans fired on us. But there were stories out there that it was actually Americans that fired on Mexicans on Mexican territory. So his question is, show me the spot. I want to interview the people. I want to talk to the people. Where is the spot that this happened? And what happened was, in those 2 years, communication was different back then. The president would go out on the train and he'd go visit parts of the country and he'd give these speeches and the whole town would come out to see the president give this speech, and Abraham Lincoln would roll into town a few days or a few weeks later and give a counter to that. And he would give a speech. It's in part the way he gained a national audience and presence because they had seen him come to town before. And he posed an interesting question where it ends up that Abraham Lincoln was more right than wrong, but that's also where he got some of his oration skills, he got some of his national presence, and it was inspirational to me because he was this lone congressman who decided to go out there and hold his government accountable. Let's go to another time. There was a person by the name of Sam Houston. For those of you who follow history, Sam Houston's pretty important to Texas history, right? Well, interestingly enough, Sam Houston, the allegation was, got into a brawl on the streets of Washington, D.C. with a member of Congress. Congress was incensed by this. They held him in contempt of Congress. They prosecuted him there in the House of Representatives using inherent contempt, and they decided that his punishment would be incarceration. They didn't go through the executive branch. They didn't go through the judicial branch. There was contempt of Congress, and the punishment was that they were going to incarcerate him, and they didn't have their own jail, despite some of the things I've read. There was no house jail ever. And so what they did, they found a saloon or a bar, whatever you want to call it back then, on the second level, and they made him stay upstairs there. So he got an attorney. His attorney was Francis Scott Key. That was his attorney. And they went and argued. Well, he ended up being incarcerated for a few months. Move on to another story. There was a person named Gorsuch. I believe her first name was Anne. Anne was the Environmental Protection Agency administrator in the Reagan administration. Her son, Neil Gorsuch, would go on to become a Supreme Court justice more recently. But interestingly, Congress wanted documents from Anne Gorsuch, and she would not cough them up. She would not give them up. She said, no, come after me, do whatever you want. She faced down Congress, and much to my chagrin, she won. Okay? I think it was wrong. I think it was a wrong decision. Congress decided not to stand up for itself and just allowed it to go. Let's fast forward to the night, 9/11. not 2001, but 9/11, when our facility in Benghazi, Libya was attacked. We saw the stories, we heard about the deaths, we saw the fires, we saw these news reports, and I happen to be the subcommittee chairman on national security within the Oversight Committee. So with some smart staff, we issued a preservation letter to Hillary Clinton. And we sent a note. Now, under the Federal Records Act, you have to preserve all your official correspondence and communications. But I sent her a preservation letter that required to expand that universe for any extemporaneous notes, personal emails, other types of communication from that night, anything that had to do with Libya and Benghazi. So it expanded the universe of which she was legally obligated to contain those materials. I insisted I really wanted to go to Benghazi, and it took me about 30 days to finally get to Libya. I was the only member of Congress that would go, and so I went, not the safest thing in the world that I ever did. But as I met with the people in Tripoli, they wouldn't. By the way, that's fairly surreal. Go to Tripoli? I mean, I remember when Reagan was trying to bomb Tripoli and couldn't go over France. I still haven't forgiven the French for that part, but had to send our planes around, and we bombed trying to take out Gaddafi. And so the idea that, I would go into Libya willingly, knowingly, but they send you a really good security team with you. You get this essentially a SEAL team to escort you in. It's pretty intense. And they brought me in there, and we finally got to the embassy, not Benghazi, but in Tripoli, and met with the people who had actually gone through and under that attack. And I talked to them, heard them, they cried, they were scared, they just want to be with their families. You can't even imagine. It's a small embassy with a small consulate. These people knew each other, couldn't be with their families, couldn't really speak with their families, couldn't speak freely with their families. It was all classified stuff. And everything I was hearing, it was very evident that what Hillary Clinton and Susan Rice and Barack Obama and Leon Panetta and everybody, they were all lying. They were just flat out lying. What they were saying was never the truth. It wasn't even close to the truth. Now, we could do hours on just Libya and Benghazi, and we could talk about Hillary Clinton and how she lied and she couldn't cough up these emails, and eventually we started cross-referencing the emails with Trey Gowdy and others, and we started to realize, hey, what's this address? Oh, that's Hillary Clinton's address. That's her personal email. Oh, okay. Well, let's go get all those records. And then she wouldn't cough those up, and she could never admit. And then James Comey, I'm having some direct interaction with him, and he's telling, look, I just don't see any intent that she meant to circumvent the law. And I said, she set up her personal email the very same day that she started her very first confirmation hearing to become the Secretary of State. I'm sure that was just a coincidence, right? So we went through that whole thing. Now fast forward again to another part. This all kind of ties together for me. The mess that we fall into right now, I think, and I would argue, and I can expand upon this with further questions, is the fact that we have a broken system where Congress does not stand up for itself. It is impotent to its ability to force the executive branch to produce the documents that are necessary for a government like ours, which is essentially run by the people, to see what they should be able to see. For instance, as chairman of the Oversight Committee, I had an awesome power. I mean, it was an awesome power. I could unilaterally, without having to go to a judge, without having to go to anybody else, not the speaker, nobody, I could unilaterally issue a subpoena on anyone, anywhere, for anything. Now, I can tell you feel that weight of that and that awesome responsibility, and you use it very judiciously. And usually it'd go a couple different directions. I would go to this person and say, I really need these documents, and I'd have the piece of paper here, and I'd say, well, I'm not going to give them to you. And I said, and then explain that I could issue this subpoena. It'll take me about 10 seconds to sign this. Do you want me to sign it, or do you want to give it to me? I'll just give it to you. Or it would be, hey, Congressman, will you issue a subpoena? Because I can't let my bosses know that I was willing to give it to you. I want to look like I stood tough, and you just issued the subpoena. Then I got the air cover to protect my job, and I really respected that. In fact, I said to Comey at one time when he was coming back to testify, and I said, do you need a subpoena? And he's like, no, I don't need a subpoena. And I said, well, you can tell him that you were going to get one, and I told you were going to go. He said, okay, thank you. Okay, that's good. So it would go down a variety of those different ways. But here's the problem. And this played out with a guy named Brian Pagliano. Brian Pagliano was the IT specialist for Hillary Clinton. Was with her on the campaign, was with her the 4 years at the State Department, and then was back with her in the campaign later, okay? Brian Pagliano, 4 years while serving at the Secretary of State, was there on the 7th floor. That's kind of the senior staff, right? Through our investigation, we issued a subpoena for all of his documentation, all of his communications regarding the setting up of this server. Because it was outside of government, we wanted to see how these two systems are working. He was even granted immunity by the Department of Justice, okay? When I brought John Ratcliffe, who, if Donald Trump wins, you watch, that guy's going to become the Attorney General of the United States. John Ratcliffe is former U.S. attorney, a very accomplished attorney, and also a member of the Judiciary Committee. He came with me with Trey Gowdy, who was also a prosecutor for 20 plus years. I was on Judiciary. I wasn't even an attorney. So, I know that sounds like I'm bragging, but, y'all didn't get that one, did you? Not an attorney, yes. So, but I brought him with me to get the Department of Justice to look at this immunity agreement that they had issued this Brian Pagliano. No requirement to cooperate with the government. Why would you give somebody an immunity agreement if there was no requirement to cooperate with the government? Like, what's the trade here? We issued a subpoena for him to attend a hearing that I was conducting. He didn't show up. So then we stepped it up a notch, had the U.S. Marshals serve the subpoena. He didn't show up. Here's the problem. Congress is only as strong as its ability to enforce a subpoena. So if in order for me to get that subpoena served and then prosecuted for non-attendance, I had to go to Eric Holder. Remember Steve Bannon? Remember Peter Navarro? They thought they didn't have to attend. Oh, it took days before that White House decided to go ahead and prosecute and put those people in jail. They're both in jail right now, right? But if I wanted to take that same fact pattern and say, I duly issued subpoena, you got to show up, the Department of Justice gets to make that decision. And then here's the further rub, and then I can get into more intricacy if you want. Congress has a power that it never exercises. Since I was first elected in 2008, I've just never seen it done. And that is the power of the purse, right? It should be, the way our framers set it up, that Congress can come back and say, no. You're going to cough up those documents. You're going to provide us those materials. You're going to prosecute these cases, or we're not going to fund you and you can all be out of a job and you can go home. Yes, right? When Congress first worked, they didn't have an appropriations committee. Then they thought, oh, this is getting really complicated. We got trillions of dollars going out the door. By the way, if you spend $1 million a day every day, it'll take you almost 3,000 years to get to 1 trillion. Okay? That's how big that number is. And we're, what, 34 trillion in debt right now? So the mess that we're in and the lack of the ability of Congress to rein it in and to use the power of the purse to enforce the will of the people is one of the biggest problems. Since the 1972 Budget Act, only one time, has Congress ever gone through regular order. And surprise, surprise, and I can give further detail about regular order is, but there's 12 appropriations bills. The President comes up with the budget, Congress comes up with the budget, they go through reconciliation, that's the top line number, they do 12 appropriations bills, every bill, every line is read on the floor, you can offer amendments, and you vote on the final thing, and voila, that's the way you're supposed to get to regular order and the amount of money, okay? Only one time since 1972 have we actually done that. Guess what? It was the 1 year where the budget balanced. Newt Gingrich was the Speaker of the House, and Bill Clinton was the President of the United States. I was told, I haven't verified this, but I was told over in the Senate they actually held a hearing with the Federal Reserve. What would the Federal Reserve do if there was no U.S. debt? What would they do? Right? I mean, we are so far from that problem, but that's what they were worried about. That wasn't too long ago, okay? It can be done. This is what I wish people would do. I wish the public would demand this. I can tell you, having done hundreds of town hall meetings while I was in Congress, never got a question. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, budget process, if I just let it rip and, hey, you just asked me a question, I would never, ever get a question about those things. And I'm here to argue with you and tell you, these are the biggest problems that we have. They create the biggest problems. If you don't starve the beast, you don't have liberty, okay? Every government decision that's made out there to spend money is the decision to take money out of your wallet and give it to somebody else. That takes away your liberty, your freedom, your future. Now, that is a fundamental difference in approach to the way the liberals would say, where they worship at the altar of more government, big government. We need more bureaucracy. I remember Nancy Pelosi arguing that the shelves are bare. Donald Trump's going to ruin this country because we're going to have no money to run the federal government. Are you kidding me? My biggest criticism of Donald Trump, and I've told him this, the tax cuts were great. Taxes came down, the economy got better, revenue to the Treasury went up. The all-time record high revenue to the Treasury happened after the Trump tax cuts. Democrats would say it cost us billions. No, it didn't. It drove revenue to the Treasury. The problem is, they did not cut spending. And if you don't cut spending, you're going to grow the beast instead of cut the beast. All right? All right, I got to tell you one more set of stories, and then whatever questions you got. Like I said, I grew up here. This is an idyllic place to grow up. I was going to Brookside. I was going to Foothill. I was not worried about where I was going to get a meal. I was not worried about if I was going to be safe. I was not worried about any of those things. Not everybody grows up like that. And it took me later in life to figure out that I had a really good. We were in Northern California. We were in Southern California. Then we moved to Scottsdale, Arizona. That was really roughing it in Scottsdale. We ended up going to Colorado my senior year in high school. And then, like I said, I got a scholarship because I played soccer. I played soccer here. I played, you got warm enough weather, I just play soccer all the time. I remember going to earthquake games and the whole bit. In fact, what brought my dad and mom down to Southern California, my dad was the managing general partner of the Los Angeles Aztecs. That was kind of back in the old days of soccer, which is much more prevalent here than most parts of the country. So anyway, I had it really good. But then I do remember a few hard things that happened in my life that I wasn't expecting, right? My parents told me, they brought us in. Now, normally we didn't all eat breakfast together. Usually my dad made breakfast, my mom made sometimes lunch, but always made dinner, thank goodness, because my dad couldn't cook, my mom could. But you can't screw up breakfast too bad. But we come into, this is in Scottsdale, Arizona, and my parents come in and explain that they're going to get divorced. And it was hard, because I did not see it coming. I never saw them argue, never saw them anything. Like, did not really see this thing coming. And it was hard. That is not, when you're a young teenager, what you expect or want to hear. Especially when they're getting there was no conflict. It wasn't fighting, there wasn't, But only later did I come to realize, it was the best for them, and that it had nothing to do with us, and they loved us. But it took years to kind of work that out, especially when you're young and you just don't have any reference points. After they were separated and divorced, I remember my mom came in and told us that she had cancer. She had breast cancer. Now, again, as a young man, cancer was bad, right? But she had breast cancer, and she was in her 30s. And I only wish they had the kind of diagnostics and treatment that they have today, because I'm sure they could have been able to take care of it. But she fought it for just over 10 years. And she passed away at an age that's younger than I am now. And, she got to spend time with our son, but not our other two daughters. And that was hard. Nobody, should have to go through that experience. And it's interesting, because the more I matured, the older I get, the more I realize how precious and sweet and loving that time was. That I had experiences with her going through that I would have never had otherwise. And I still, she passed away in 1995. So it's been a while. And I still have those moments, just that split second where something dramatic happens in my life, and I think, I should call my mom, My dad would later pass away from colon cancer. Doctor would say, and this is particularly for you guys out there, the doctor would say, told us, he said, if your dad had any sort of checkup in the last 8 or 10 years, we would have caught this, he'd be just fine. And so I get my colonoscopy every week. I do joke with the doctors and others. I said, do you know how many political enemas I've had in my life? I have been more thoroughly checked out by the Democrats than you can ever do in this procedure, I promise you. But before my dad was diagnosed with cancer, after my parents' divorce, my mom's fighting my senior year, it was just after that. And my dad brought me and my brother Alex into, we were in Winter Park, Colorado. If any of you are skiers, great ski town, okay? It was a small ski town. It was like 700 people lived there. We had this brilliant house, beautiful views of the mountains and the snow, and we had snowmobiles, and we had all kinds of fun stuff. And my dad came in and told us, he said, I am, with tears in his eyes, saying, I'm so sorry, but I have to file for bankruptcy. And, that's not what you want to hear when you're living life so well. And I'd always done that. And we moved into this apartment, and my dad had the only bedroom, and then me and my brother slept on air mattresses in the front room. And I worked a couple jobs, and I'd take a good portion of that paycheck and hand it over to my dad. So we had stuff to eat and rent to pay. And I share this with you because every single one of you, to a T, has this story. Different players, different circumstances. Can be addiction, can be an accident, could be financial problems. It could be, I don't know what it is, you know what it is, every single one of us has this same story. You would never know it. You drive by somebody or see a friend in the supermarket, or you drive by somebody and they look at you and you think, what did I do? You probably didn't do anything. You know? It's probably not about you. But here's the thing that's an opportunity, I think, for all of us collectively. Okay? And I worry about this country because I used to think this way and think, you know what? No matter where you are in the political spectrum, we all want to achieve the same thing. We just have different ways of getting there. I don't believe that anymore. I think there are people that are subversive to the United States of America, and I think they're subversive to the idea and the concept of liberty. But here's what I do know. The thing that is most relating to people, and what I want as a conservative, quite frankly, as a Republican, even my friends, I've got really good friends that are hardcore Democrats, okay? But the people that love their country first, that will stand for the flag, that believe in the liberty and life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, even though they might be on the other side of the political aisle or identify as something else, that's fine. The people who truly care and will move this country forward, the heart of our country, and make it the very best that it can be, we've got to be able to relate to them and communicate with them. It goes back to what I said at the very beginning, okay? You're not going to beat somebody over the head with your labor participation rate and convince them to vote for whoever or support whatever it is you're trying to achieve, okay? The most effective post I may have put up, and I shared a couple of them, was something I posted up on Facebook. Now, when I was the chairman of the Oversight Committee, it was hard. I mean, I left Congress early. I left in the middle of my term, and I can expand on this. But when you love your wife and adore your kids and you're only home 4, maybe 5 days a month, it really gets to you after 8 years, okay? It's hard. Our daughter was like first, second grade, and I missed like everything. And anyway, I blew into town. I was there less than 24 hours, and my wife told me, she said, Jason, our toilet is not working. I need you to fix it before you get on that airplane. Sure enough, I'm up in the air on that Delta flight, and I get it, you know, they have internet, and I get this, hey, remember that toilet I told you that wasn't working? It's still not working. And she said, but the good news is I called my dad, and he walked me through it. And she had a picture, and the picture was from, you know, taken here with her thumb out, like I fixed it, and then the toilet in the background. And I was like, I'm so sorry. But I also thought it was kind of funny, you know, it's kind of cute. So I said, are you all right if I post that up to Facebook? She said, go ahead, at your own peril, go ahead. So I posted up to Facebook, and I explained that I was supposed to fix it. I didn't, but my wife fixed it. Oh my gosh, millions of times this thing went out over Facebook to like, and most all of the comments said, why did we send you to Congress? Julie's the one that knows how to fix things. Like, so funny, right? These types of things were much more endearing to my spreading the sphere of people that I could communicate with. I'll give you another quick example. I found myself in Afghanistan, and I kind of shed off the handlers, and I wanted to talk to these Marines who were down by Kandahar, which is kind of the south, I guess that's the southwest part of the country. And these Marines, literally a Marine in Afghanistan is wearing about $100,000 worth of equipment. That's what it takes to a fully equipped Marine out in the field in a combat situation. They got $100,000 on their person. And so I wanted to find out what's working well, what's not working well, what's happening, what's not happening. And so I just randomly picked these 2 Marines, and we went over to the side. Nobody else is listening. It's just the 3 of us. And I said, thank you for doing what you're doing, but please tell me what's happening. What are you worried about? What's working well, but what's not working well? And it took a few minutes for them to kind of loosen up before one of the Marines said, "Permission to speak freely?" I said, "Yes, no, that's exactly what I'm trying to do." And with a bit of emotion in his voice, he said, I can't get anybody to help my wife mow the lawn at our house." That's what he was worried about. We had sent them out there for a year-plus deployment, put his life on the line every moment. And you know what? That's what he needed help with. And I thought, shame on us, shame on that community, shame on for not stepping up. So I guess at the end of the day, what's going to make the fabric of our country stronger, better, more concerned, more tight, like the type of community we all want to live in, is reaching out to those people maybe that you don't know and doing it for all the right reasons. If you really speak from your heart and explain why you believe what you believe, and do so for all the right reasons, not just some crass political, "hey, I got to get your vote" type of thing, that's what moves the meter. And share with them, laugh with them. And even if they don't vote your way, they're going to know if you're doing it sincerely or not doing it sincerely. I wouldn't recommend leading with the, "hey, my mom had cancer and then she died," okay? I'm not suggesting you do that, okay? But if somebody asks me a question about law enforcement, I explain, I tell them the story about what happened in Southern California. When somebody banged on our door, and my dad was out of town and it was raining, and this law enforcement officer got there, and we could see the tracks. My mom knew she was in trouble, and she could see this silhouette in the window. And I still remember that police officer just calming a young, 10-year-old kid down by saying, "I'll be there all night." And I kept looking, through the window, and I could see him there all night. That's why I'm so passionate about it. So I kind of share that with you, and I love chatting with audiences because you all have this in you. You have your own stories. And you can explain why you believe what you believe and do so in a more compelling way that allows this kind of movement of people who love liberty and freedom to move forward. And that's my hope, that's my prayer, that's my hope and my plea, because we do live in the greatest country on the face of the planet. We really do. So, thank you.
Who's running the security of our country right now?
All right, so I did write a book called The Puppeteers. I hope you have a chance to look at that. The other one that I wrote, the first one I wrote, was The Deep State. That, you want to get fresh off my mind what happened in Benghazi, how the government was, what they were doing and how they were doing it. It's pretty scary. I'm working on a fifth book. It's not yet out. I don't have a good title for it, but it's basically how the government spies on us and what they do with it, how they manipulate it, how they buy and sell information. You'd be shocked about how much information they acquire and how much they sell. You'd be like, you will not believe what's going to come through here. The safety and security of our country, I think the biggest problem that we have right now is the southern border. The immigration, the ones I think we're failing are the people that are trying to come here legally and lawfully. Those are the ones that the people that are going through this, those are the ones that are suffering more than anything. I had a case where a woman insisted that she was going to do it legally and lawfully, or she wasn't going to come. Even though her family is all here and all of her family is telling her, just come, just stay, don't pay any attention to that expiration on the visa. And she said no. And it took 22 years. She was from the Philippines. 22 years before we finally got that case over the finish line and she was able to come join her family full time. And those people are being failed right now. Law enforcement, unfortunately, and look, the overwhelming majority of them are good quality people doing the right things. I'm not talking about the men and women on the front line. I'm talking about the bureaucrats who are desk jockeys there in Washington, D.C. that have never seen the front lines. Those are the people that I really worry about, because there is so much police power that they have in order to grab your information and look at it. And one of the scarier things that's happening right now is in the world of facial recognition. Facial recognition can be good, right? Used in the right way, it can be good. But it was mentioned before about a social credit score. I think Alex mentioned that. Let me explain to you what's happening here, okay? Because this happens in China. Social credit score is assessing you, what you do, what you buy, where you go, how you shop, who you interact with, and then coming up, who you're saying it to, and then being able to limit what you see and what you can do, where you can go, where you can spend your money, and what you can do. That happens in China now. It's where we're headed if we don't change course right here in the United States. They're going to want to charge you more. They're going to want to assume more. They literally are using search terms like, have you gone to Dick's Sporting Goods? Do you go to Cabela's? Are you a hunter? These are the people that are on the watch lists, right? These are the people that they are spending extra time and attention, and it's so fundamentally wrong. So there's a lot more to this answer, but it is kind of scary about the police powers and how they're, but the social scores, if we don't pay attention now, you're going to have one and you're not going to like it, because it's not equality. They preach equality, that's not what they're after.
Jason, would you include some of your knowledge about how NASA and the post office and people who don't seem to need facial recognition have these surveillance powers?
Yeah, so most
and do we have any privacy at all? I just assume I have none. Every time I have any conversation, I just say, hey, NSA.
Yeah. So what's shocking to me is we're not just talking about Homeland Security. We're not just talking about the FBI. When I was in Congress, we did a whole set of hearings on why did the Social Security Administration have all this ammunition and guns? Like, what do you need it for? Well, it's dangerous out there for the IRS. Okay. If it's dangerous for the IRS, then you call the local sheriff. If you're going to serve a warrant, or you're going to serve a subpoena or do something with somebody, whether you're with the IRS or somebody and you've gone to a judge and you've got orders, great. Talk to your local sheriff. They probably know that person. They have all the guns and ammo you need. You don't need your own law enforcement. We did a ton of hearings on this. One of the things that was also interesting, this is a little bit off topic, but it reminded me, it was like one of the very first things I did in Congress. When Barack Obama became the president, within the first 30 days, he stopped the recycling program for the United States military on the spent brass. So for those of you not as familiar with guns, you shoot a round of ammunition, there's a shell that comes off it that's made of brass. They normally collect all that, recycle it in order to make more ammunition, right? Makes sense. Recycling. Who would have thought the Democrats were opposed to recycling? They were opposed to that, and what happened was it drove the cost of ammunition through the roof because they got rid of it. And so we started to dive into that. That was one of the very first projects I looked at. Why is it that you did that? Because they were using basic economics. They knew that the more expensive it would become, the less they would have. Now, what they didn't realize is that Americans caught on to that pretty quick, and it drove it even higher, because for years you couldn't get a 22. I mean, the ammunition for the 22 caliber bullet was like unheard of. It was unbelievable how, anyway, it's just one of those crafty things they kind of do behind the scenes. The Postal Service, again, this is all done in the name of the kids, and protecting Americans. Every single letter that goes through a post office or a mailbox is scanned. They know exactly who sent it, where they sent it, where it from, who touched it, where it went. Just know that. I mean, a lot of people will say, oh, well, I've never done anything wrong, so I don't care as long as it catches bad guys. If it catches bad people, then I'm good with it. I don't know. I mean, one of the things I really fought was over at Homeland Security, the TSA. The TSA and those whole body scanners, I think one of the reasons I was on Fox a lot early on is because I kind of went to war with the TSA saying, you don't need a whole body image of me to get on that airplane. You just don't. I have a fundamental right to my privacy, and you don't need to see me naked. So those body imaging machines, we had one person testify and tell us, I should say, I don't think it was testify, but he told us, he said, look, if you go in and look at that machine, I can read the date of a dime if you put it on your back. Imagine what is going on with the imagery. Males, females, your genitals, everything was exposed to people that were behind a wall. And they said, we don't transmit this electronically. I said, you liar. That thing, you going through that whole body imaging machine, and there's somebody else in another room. That's why you have these USB cords, and this is why you have these Ethernet cables going up over into that room. Let me go see it. I'm a member of Congress. I have the highest security clearance there can be. I want to see what that person's seeing. No, Congressman, we can't let you do that. Why can't you let me see it? Oh, it's too graphic. I say, well, that's exactly my point. You won't even let me see it because it's too graphic, but you have thousands of people that are doing this. Well, we can't take images of it. I said, come on. I take this mobile phone out. I said, I could take a picture of anything. You're telling me these people aren't taking pictures of screens of maybe girls or guys that they really like? You're telling me that's never happened. Anyway, we finally got that changed. Now it comes across as more of a, if you've seen it, it's like a stick person with, anyway. I could go on, but we got to be vigilant of this, giving these people tools and what they're doing with them.
Wow, so. You're just really making travel sound more and more fun.
Yes.
I recently had a very intimate...
By the way, there's a better solution to doing this. That's what Amtrak does. You ever been on Amtrak and gone through a whole body imaging machine? You ever gone through a metal detector on Amtrak? No. You know why? Dogs. This is my number one thing they do on Amtrak. They have what are called vapor-wake dogs. They train them I know a lot about vapor-wake dogs. They train them in Auburn, and they're of certain breeds, and they're trained up on certain scents. And you could take this whole room, a dog walks through once, and it could pinpoint exactly if you have a single bullet or whatever explosive device they're looking for. They're amazing. And you know what? There are people with certain religions who believe that if they're killed in the presence of a dog, they won't ascend to their equivalent of heaven. So I'm like, put a dog on every flight, for goodness sake. There's a great cartoon. It's a Far Side cartoon. You remember the Far Side? Yeah? And it's this bloodhound, and he's pulling this leash really tight, and behind him he's got like 20 hunters with these big guns, and the dog's leaning forward into it, and the little bubble off the dog says, I can't smell a damn thing. The point being is nobody knows if that dog can smell or not, because the guys came back to me and said, well, the dog can only work for 20 minutes. And I said, what do you mean only work? What is this, a union dog? What do you got, like... And they said, no, then his nose is not as sensitive as it is in the first 20 minutes. They said, nobody knows. Nobody knows. They don't know if he can smell or not smell. But a would-be bad guy is going to be scared to death that the dog could smell them. And you're in the preventive business. You're supposed to prevent a disaster. These are the discussions I have with these idiots. I'm telling you, it's just like, oh my goodness. Well, that was quite the question. I've never had that question, but I like that. That was fun.
I think I'd rather be inspected. In fact, I think I have been inspected more intimately by a few dogs. But anyway, let's move on. Jason, some questions about J6. And there's a snowstorm of questions for you, and many of them are about J6. Do you have any insight on the J6 political prisoners? Why is Congress not insisting on the release of these prisoners? And basically the question is, where are the Republicans?
Well, they made several mistakes. One is they should have shut it down when Republicans were not allowed to equally participate on the investigative committee. That thing should have just been shut down. And when Republicans took over Congress, they could have defunded it. They could defund this. They could take this and say, sorry, we're done here. And by the way, let's go ahead and investigate this and offer some potentially some criminal referrals on destroying evidence that would further expose the truth. That's what they're trying to do. You make the argument and say, look, we're just trying to expose the truth. Why is it that we don't have all these communications? Why are these videos destroyed? Why do we not have all this information? So, you know, they've just tried to be as quiet as it could. Look, let me make sure you understand. That was horrific. It was bad. It was really bad. But what bothers me is the same vigor that they took in prosecuting and going after those people. What about those 500 plus riots and attacks on federal buildings and the people that were hurt and maimed and killed in those? They don't do anything on that.
You mean the mostly peaceful protests?
The what?
Are you talking about the mostly peaceful protests?
Mostly peaceful protests, yeah.
Yeah. Those were fun. Good times. Is Jack Smith a legitimate prosecutor? And the question...
Okay, so, well, one thing, yeah, okay, so Jack Smith, right? Special prosecutor. There is no, as Justice, what? Yeah, Clarence Thomas pointed out, there is no special counsel statute, which calls into question the idea of a whole special counsel. Now, I do think Congress should carve something out where there is a deep conflict of interest, but there is no statute that governs this, how it applies, what they do. So they toss this around, and it's become a political bludgeoning tool, and I think it's fundamentally wrong. And I think ultimate prosecution of a case that somebody like a Jack Smith, when you have a Supreme Court justice saying, we're going to probably shoot this down because you didn't even have the authority to do it, calls into question the whole movement here. And by the way President Biden and the Democrats have characterized the Supreme Court ruling on immunity is so fundamentally wrong, right? It makes perfect sense. It's a simple ruling. Do things within your official capacity and duties as the President of the United States, you have immunity. You go outside those bounds, you don't have immunity. It's that simple. But the President interacting with the Department of Justice or interacting with other government officials about the integrity of an election is within the bounds of his duty. So it's absurd that what they're trying to go through. And by the way, and we were talking about this at dinner, the most important ruling, in my personal opinion, to come out of that Supreme Court this season was Chevron deference, okay? That is by far, for those of you that don't understand, the government was taking the position, when I say the government, the administrative state was taking the position that ambiguity in a law meant that they could make up the rule or decision bypassing and pushing aside the court. And this finally gave deference back to the court to say, no, congressional intent and other things. It also is a reminder that Congress has got to come up with better laws with better specificity, and they won't have these types of problems. I did want to tell one quick story which helps illuminate the problem here. And I did write about it in one of the books. I can't remember which one. But this is sort of at least with members of Congress, it's kind of this story, legendary story that goes around. And it goes like this, where a member of Congress wanted to go meet with the cabinet secretary. And the cabinet secretary, when they got there, was not there. Senior staff was there, but the cabinet secretary was not there. And the member of Congress was all exacerbated by this. It's like, come on, I waste my time. I set up this appointment. The secretary said you're going to be there and not here. And senior staff's trying to calm the member of Congress down. And finally, the member says, listen, I'm not here to meet with the B team. I want to meet with the secretary. And finally, the kind of senior person of the senior staff says, Congressman, you're right. We are the B team. We be here before you. We be here after you. And we be the ones to make the decisions around here. So you're actually meeting with the right people. And there is so much truth to that. They know that they can wait you out. And I've changed. I've morphed over the course of time. I really do believe there should be term limits, but there should be term limits on the bureaucracy.
Yes, what a great idea.
And I'm not talking about your rank and file person who's helping with Social Security's getting out the door. That's checks out the door. Your postal service who's walking those neighborhoods. That's not who I'm talking about. I'm talking about senior staff. Those people, presidential appointments, others, those people have got to go. They've got to turn them over. You got to turn them over.
The Show Me State's busy at it again, right? The Attorney General of Missouri is suing the state of New York because they say that the gag order is creating denial of access to a presidential candidate, that it's an attack on free speech and an attack on the democratic process. Do you have thoughts on that?
It's a good theory. I don't know. I don't know. I haven't really thought about that one. You probably have an answer to that, but yeah, I mean, the idea that you're going to lock up and tie up in a court during a presidential year, but where's the bounds to that? Where's the limits to that? I don't know. I'd have to think that one through.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Steve Bannon's in jail. You listed a bunch of people that were Navarro and on and on. You had a good list. A lot of people are frustrated. They say the Republicans really don't have any spine or cojones, and people from mild-mannered, nice people from John Yoo to, well, there's Anna Paulina Luna. Many people, and people are asking about this. What do you say to people like Megyn Kelly who say that until lawfare is unleashed on the left, it won't stop, that we have to fight fire with fire? Bannon says that we have to go be principled but ruthless and have to go Old Testament. Where do you stand on that?
Go Old Testament. That's one way of doing it. I haven't heard that way. That's pretty funny. I still come back to what I explained to you earlier. We got to be careful. We got to be principled. We got to be the adults in the room, but it doesn't mean we be timid and that we just sit down and lay down, and we got to get after it. And this whole idea, I shouldn't talk about that. And so, no, this is where I disagree with Paul Ryan. This is where I disagreed with him, because he basically said to me, when we got in the majority, we're legislating now, we're not doing oversight. And I'm like, oversight should be even stronger when we're in control. Oversight should be even more aggressive when we're going up against the bureaucracy. If they haven't done anything wrong, if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, that's fine. Not all the investigations we did led to nefarious intent. I did one about schools administered by the military overseas. I thought this was going to be a target-rich environment. You know what I found? Pretty well done. It's actually really well done. Didn't find the waste, fraud, and abuse we thought we'd find. It took me a year to figure that out, but I'm glad we did it. That's what good oversight's supposed to do. But there are 72 inspectors general. They have 13,500 people, and these are the internal auditors. Well, when you're going up against 2.5 million federal employees, that's still not very many people in ratio. In my oversight committee, I had budget for about 60. We always were staffed in the 40s. Going up against 110,000 people at the Department of Justice. I mean, it's hard to get at that stuff. Now, there are more aggressive. I'm associated with the Heritage Foundation. They started a thing called the Oversight Project. The Oversight Project is intended to do that, be more aggressive. It ends up that a Freedom of Information Act is far more powerful than a congressional subpoena. It shouldn't be that way. But you can get to court faster. You can take it outside the jurisdiction of Washington, D.C. You can get before a federal judge, and you can compel document production. And so they've raised millions of dollars in this effort, and I think it's great. But again, I still, and again, 110% in favor of that, but also in favor of using the power of the purse. Never gets done. Never gets. All the Democrats want to do is grow it, the bureaucracy. If Republicans are blessed with, getting the chance to take, then they ought to just slice and dice and put it back and go back. And we picked years. We said, look, we just want to go back to the year 2018. Can we live like that? Oh no, that would be just unbelievable. Could never make that. Oh wait, I do need to explain one more thing, and we're getting to the end here, I promise. You all have been so patient. This is really important for you to understand why we're in the mess that we're in. The budget, okay? It's not the sexiest thing, it's hard to do ads on it. But it's your money, okay? It's our money. Roughly 90% of what goes on in the federal budget is mandatory programmatic budgeting. My second term, I think it was, I asked to be on the budget committee. And as critical as I was about Paul Ryan and his comment about oversight, I am a huge compliment to Paul Ryan on his understanding of the budget process, and coming up with a plan that was going to put us on a more financial stable track. He was very good that way. There's a reason why he was at one point very revered, because he knew that budget and he understood it, and I wanted to understand it because it's not like business. Okay? For those of you involved in business and GAAP rules, you know, the generally accepted principles of you know, that is just, is that the right principles? Yeah, generally. All those regular accounting things out the door at the federal government. When you could print your own money, dangerous, right? So what happens is Congress figured out a while ago, they don't want to have to go try to get an appropriation every year. Just make it mandatory programmatic spending that has a COLA built into it. And so Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security are all on autopilot. Whether or not the government closes down or doesn't close down, that is such a facade. That still keeps going. The only thing that when a government shutdown happens is, there's somebody there to process the mail to send it out. The money is still moving, okay? But here's the problem. When you have these budget fights and it gets to be, you know, what should we do? They're arguing about less than 10% of the budget. Now keep in mind, what are the biggest discretionary? Okay, right? The mandatory programmatics over here, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, and hundreds of other programs, most of which you've never heard of. Hundreds of them. The discretionary, number one expense on discretionary spending is interest on the national debt. Okay? It's now surpassed defense spending. If you ask me, if you want to have mandatory programmatic spending, it should actually probably be for the Department of Defense. Nevertheless, those two are the biggest items. Then you start to get down into the weeds, and the EPA and, you know, all these the Department of Education, we're talking about a day or two or three of our annual expenditure. All should be cut, all should be, you know, I want to go back with a fine-tooth comb. Texas has a 2-year budget process, one Congress, one budget. I kind of like that. I like zero-based budgets where you start from scratch and you have to plus up from there to justify their existence. There are lots of ways to help solve this. Again, never ever a question anybody asks in a town hall meeting. But one of the most important things if we're going to get ourselves back on the financial track, because once these programs stop, it's like Ronald Reagan said, they never end. And that is the fundamental problem. And that is it is so hard and is so difficult, but it requires discipline and making hard choices. And people who do and are willing to cut the budget need to be patted on the back and supported more than ever. Because in terms of fiscal conservatives, we have less than 100 in the Congress. We may have 200 plus Republicans, we got less than 100 that are fiscal conservatives. That is I could go through a list and tell you who's who based on the votes that are happening. And if you conceptualize the problem that we have there, we got to figure out how to solve that. So, okay. All right, let's make this.
Okay.
We're halfway there, so hang in there with us.
Jason, I just want you to recognize that I have a snowstorm of index cards up here. There's so many questions for you, and it's so great. Jason says the answers come from outside of Washington. He believes that we should all believe in America with a smile on our face, and says it's up to all of us to help fix it. So let me wind up our Q&A time with you tonight by asking you, what would you like these people to do when they wake up, when they open their eyes tomorrow morning? What are you hoping that these Americans will do?
It's kind of the big, most important question, right? stay involved with your country, love your country, talk from your heart, share what you believe in. Don't get too frustrated. Keep a smile on your face. I mean, my friend Trey Gowdy, Trey Gowdy is congressman from South Carolina. Y'all know him. He looks over at me and he says, "Will you quit smiling? Like, this is really a serious thing over here." Trey Gowdy would also say, I've lost like 20 to 25 pounds since December, and I'm not taking some funny pill. I just started exercising better and eating better. But anyway, Gowdy would get up there, and if he were here to introduce me, I'm way off topic here, but if he was here to introduce me, he was introducing me once, and he says, "All right, everybody, I want to introduce my friend Jason here. Now, I'm really proud of him. Really proud of Jason. He always has this dry wit, never cracks a smile. And he threw out this, I'm really proud of him because, boy, he took on that Jenny Craig, and by golly, he beat it. He beat it." And I'm like, "Thanks, Trey." And another time he said, "Now, you've seen Jason on Fox, and they say that a camera adds like 40 pounds, So I can explain about 20, but the other 20, I really can't explain to you. Just love your neighbor. It's the same kind of biblical principles, whether you believe in Jesus Christ like I do or you don't, whatever it is, but just be a good person and be involved and be engaged. It's amazing. The world is run by those who show up. And we should not be afraid to stand up for what we believe in, talk from our hearts without making it too personal. But the things that go on in school board meetings, in homeowners associations, for goodness sake, or your city council, or the county commission, or your representatives in the assembly, or the United States Congress, or the United States Senate, don't think it's too big. Don't think it's too big. I come from a state where Bill Clinton came in third, twice. Okay, you got Gavin Newsom, so you got your work cut out for you, okay? Utah's going to be a pretty conservative place, but it can be done here in California. It really can. And probably the greatest political influence on my life was Ronald Reagan. He came to Utah back in 1991, February 15th, and I got to spend 2 days with him. And I was probably a little bit more on the liberal side of things, trying to figure out my way. And as I got to see him and interact with him, I just loved the way he did, what he stood for, the way he was able to communicate it, and the way he did it. Like, it really mattered to me. And I started to think more and look at it more. And I look at my own kids, and some of them like Charlie Kirk. And I have a nephew who's just totally into Ben Shapiro, like loves everything he does. And so I don't think this generation here is lost in terms of, we assume that they're all going to be liberals and Democrats, but I don't buy it. I don't want to cede off to the left. I don't know why it's like everybody believes that the compassion card goes to the liberals and the Democrats. They care more because they want to spend more. That is such an incredible fallacy. And I think if we're able to break that, people win elections by who they know, who they believe in with policy and principle, but who they believe, who's honest and sincere with them. After my first election, it was at a convention. Now, I was polling at 2.5% plus or minus 4.7%. And for those of you who can't do that math, I was a statistical zero. And I went into the convention and I won. And I won by a lot, like almost 20 percentage points. The next day or 2 days later, Monday morning, I'm at Costco and I'm pumping gas. And the guy across from me says, "Hey, you're Jason Chaffetz." Now, at this point in my life, nobody is recognizing me. And I said, "Well, thank you." And he said, "Yeah, I am." And he said, "I voted for you." And I said, "Why?" And he said, I just believed you wanted it more. I just believed in your energy, your enthusiasm, your optimism. I don't know all the issues. I don't have time to figure all that out. That's the way most Americans are. That's what the Democrats have never figured out about Donald Trump. Some of you may hate his guts, but I can tell you this, he does love this country, and he's able to communicate with this country in a way that most others can't, and they don't even understand it. You have to do that with your own sphere of influence, in your own way. Don't try to be Donald Trump. Don't try to be, anybody other than yourself, because people will sniff it out. And if we do that collectively, then I think that's the long-term answer. There's no quick thing, but it is authenticity also that wins the day. You've been very generous with your time. Thanks for hearing me out. May God bless you. May God bless the United States.
Jason Chaffetz, ladies and gentlemen. Jason Chaffetz.
Thank you for watching our presentation. Please like and subscribe to our channel to get updates on new speakers, and consider joining the Liberty Forum of Silicon Valley. You can do so at our website. If you don't want to join, but want to support the principles of American liberty, you can make a tax-deductible donation via our website. The links are in the description. Thank you again, and stay free.